Jai Advaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Nanda, Jai Advaita Chandra, Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Advaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jai Advaita Chandra, Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Advaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jai Advaita Chandra, Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Can I
somebody
read?
Please.
Can I read?
Yes, yes, please.
The
Please do.
Sankirtan movement, inaugurated by Lord Chaitanya, is a transcendental pastime of the Lord. By it, I live simultaneously to preach and popularize this movement in the material world. In that Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya, Nityananda and Advaita are his expansions, and Gadadhar and Srivas are his internal and marginal potencies, respectively. The living entities are also called marginal potency because they have either of the two attitudes, namely the tendency to surrender onto Krishna or the tendency to become independent of him and try for material enjoyment. Due to this propensity for material enjoyment, the living entity becomes contaminated by the material world. When a living entity is dominated by a desire for material enjoyment and becomes entangled in the material life, he is subjected to the threefold miseries of the material existence.
So why is the living entity called marginal?
Because he's at the border of two, he's at the
Yes.
tat of two.
Yes. And so what is
So they
his
have
choice?
attitudes. Either
What
he
is the
can be independent of Krishna or he can surrender to Krishna. Can
yeah.
be independent of Krishna or can surrender to Krishna.
Yeah, that's right. That's the actually our only free will. That's our free will. Everything else happens then once we choose either Krishna or to be away from Krishna, then it's happening under the control of the material or spiritual energy. But our free will is in making the choice to be with Krishna or to be away from him. So,
But Shilpa ji, there's just one question. That sometimes, like we are under the of different gunas, like every time.
yes.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So we are in under the modes we are under the modes of the different gunas every time. So then sometimes we might choose to uh, to be on Krishna's side, and sometimes we might turn away, right? Even
That's right.
after being so, after knowing so much, still, right?
That's right. Of course. Yes. Yes. That is our position. Because our surrender is partial,
Okay.
it's not complete. So gradually.
Okay.
Mhm. Yes.
Okay. There is a nice example showing how Lord Chaitanya Sankirtan movement can save one from the miseries of the material existence. The desire for material enjoyment is like a seed sown in the earth. If a seed is inundated by too much water, there is no possibility of its fructifying. Similarly, if a conditioned soul is captivated by the material enjoyment, because the seed of such enjoyment is within his heart, he can be overwhelmed and overpowered by a flood of transcendental activity performed in the love of God. In this way, his seed of material enjoyment cannot fructify into a conditioned life of material existence. The conditioned living entity in the present age of Kali are being overpowered by the flood of love of God inaugurated by Lord Chaitanya and his associates.
So here, Srila Prabhupada is pointing out that, just as we have become so captivated by material enjoyment that we are not able to, like, we are overwhelmed by it, we are just so entrapped by the material nature. In the same way, we can be like that with spiritual nature also. And that's our true position. Overwhelmed, overpowered by a flood of transcendental activities performed in love of God. That's what it can happen. The mercy of Guru and Krishna. Gradually, gradually. We can't pretend to be at that point. Gradually. Continue reading.
I cannot see the screen.
Are you able
I
to
mean,
see
I can
it?
see the screen, but you have to pull it. Okay. In this connection, there is a verse written by His Holiness Prabodhananda Saraswati in his book Sri Caitanya Chandra Amrita. This verse states that materialist persons are very enthusiastic to maintain their family members, wife, and children, and that there are also many mystic speculators who are engaged in speculating about liberation from the miseries of the material life, and who therefore undergo various austerities and penance. But those who have discovered the great transcendental flavor in the movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu no longer have a taste for such activities.
So here Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur's book, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that, people who have too many material desires, then they don't want to look at anything else except maintaining the family. But then there are some who just want liberation, who are like completely frustrated from material life. And so they're completely frustrated. And then they are the devotees. The devotees. They neither desire liberation nor do they want anything material. They have discovered the greatest transcendental flavor in the movement of Lord Chaitanya. Let's continue reading.
Those who are under the impression that there is a material contamination in the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and in his devotional service are called Mayavadis. According to their imperfect speculation, the impersonal Brahman is the only existence in the cosmic manifestation. As soon as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is introduced, they consider that his personality arises from Maya or the eternal material energy, external material energy. Such persons consider all incarnations of the Supreme Lord to be contaminated by his material nature. According to them, the material body and the activities of matter are all that give a living being an individual identity. According to them, liberation means the end of an individual identity for the pure living being. In other words, the Mayavadi maintain that when a living entity is liberated, he becomes one with the Supreme, impersonal Brahman. According to such Mayavadi philosophy, the personality of Godhead, his his abode, his
his devotional service and his emotional devotees.
His devotional service and his emotional devotees are all under the spell of Maya and are consequently subjected to the material condition. Those who forget the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord, his abode, his devotional service, and his devotees considered all these to be but manifestation of the material activity. One who thinks that there is a possibility of arguing about the transcendence is called an agnostic, and one who thinks that there is a possibility of criticizing transcendence is called an atheist. Lord Chaitanya wanted to accept all kinds of agnostics, atheists, skeptics, and unfaithful and swallow them in the flood of love of God. Therefore, he accepted the renounced order of life to attract all these forces.
So then here, Prabhupada is pointing out that Mayavadi means a person who thinks that we are individual as long as we have a material body, and that once we get liberated, then we don't remain an individual anymore, but we become God. And then thinking that, so that means if we look at it in another way, that means Maya is so strong that she can even influence God. And so then that's why they call Mayavadis. Because then with that logic means Maya is so great that she can influence God. But that's not true, of course. Maya can never influence God. And in that same school of thought, considering that even God or his incarnations, whenever they're coming, they also, their forms are material, but that's not true. Whenever Krishna comes or his incarnations come, their form is transcendental. And so that's the reason that this theory is not a perfect theory. And saying that devotional service is also under Maya and devotees are also under Maya. So thinking that Maya is stronger, then that's the reason they're called Mayavadi, because all the importance is given to Maya, that she is the strongest. And she can even overcome God, she can overcome the devotees, you know. So, but then that's not right. And then this is what Lord Chaitanya, Lord Krishna, and all the devotees say. The scriptures say that Krishna has an eternal form, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam, that he's the cause of all causes, and his form is Satchidananda. Brahma Samhita says that. So all the authorized scriptures, the authorized devotees, they refute this theory and they establish that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So then Lord Chaitanya, he took up sannyas because he wanted to spread his mercy to everyone. As Prabhupada is saying, the agnostics, the atheists, those who argue about the existence of God, or who criticize the existence of God. So Lord Chaitanya was not looking where we are coming from, whatever is our background. He just wants to inundate the entire universe in Krishna Prema, to one and all, without any restriction, without any consideration. It's like everyone, he's just freely giving Krishna Prema. So to be able to reach out to everyone, he took up sannyas.
Lord Chaitanya remained a householder until his 24th year, and in the 25th year of his life, he accepted the renounced order. After accepting the renounced order, sannyas, he attracted many other sannyasis. When he had been spreading the Sankirtan movement as a family man, many Mayavadi sannyasis did not take his movement very seriously. But after the Lord accepted the sannyas order of life, he delivered not only Mayavadi sannyasis, But speculative students, atheists, and those who were attached to the fruitive activities and unnecessary criticism, the Lord was so kind that he accepted all these people and delivered to them the most important factor in life, love of God. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, we'll continue.
Okay. To fulfill his mission of bestowing love of God upon the conditioned souls, Lord Chaitanya devised many methods to attract those who were uninterested in love of God. After he accepted the announced order, all the agnostics, critics, atheists, mental speculators became his students and followers. Even many who were not Hindus and who did not follow the Vedic principles accepted Lord Chaitanya as the supreme teacher. The only persons who avoided the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were those sannyasis who were known as the Mayavadi philosophers of Banaras. This plight is described by Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami. The Mayavadi philosophers of Banaras were less intelligent because they wanted to measure everything by direct perception. On this basis, they calculated that whatever is perceived by material means is Maya or illusion. Since Maya is full of variegatedness and the absolute truth is transcendental to Maya, they concluded that there is no variegatedness in the absolute truth.
So Prabhupada is pointing out that everyone, after Lord Chaitanya took up sannyas, everyone joined him, everyone became his followers, irrespective which family they're coming from, what belief they were having, what process they were following, whether they were atheists, agnostics, critics, and everyone was following Lord Chaitanya except the sannyasis of Banaras. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying they were less intelligent. Why? Because they wanted everything or according to my experience, my perception. You know, like how if we believe, we say, oh, I can believe only what I see. You know, then how far will we go? How far would our knowledge be, you know? So because they here, what they can see is only material, illusion. And then they are seeing only that. And then we are seeing varieties. It's not that there is no variety. There's, after all, 8,400,000 species of life. And you know, even if we count one species, human being, how much variety is there? Each of us look different. Our fingerprints are different, our desires, or the way we speak, everything is so different. So Maya is full of variegatedness. And so their conclusion, their way of logic is, oh, Maya is variegatedness. Now, absolute truth has to be superior than Maya. So that means absolute truth has no variety. That's not true. How can be? How can there be a reflection if there is no reality? You know, how will there be our reflection in the mirror if we ourselves is not there? Or how could the mango be reflected in the mirror if the real mango is not there? So there's that logic is faulty because of not hearing from Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, which speak the truth. We'll continue.
During Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, there were also other impersonalists in philosophers known as the Mayavadi philosophers of Mayavadi philosophers of Sharanath. Sharanath is a place near Banaras where Buddhist philosophers used to reside. And even today, many stupas of the Buddhist Mayavadis can be seen. The Mayavadi philosophers of the Sharanath are different from the impersonalists who believe in the impersonal manifestation of Brahman. According To the Sharanarth philosophers, there is no spiritual existence at all. The fact is that both the Mayavadi philosophers of Banaras and the philosophers of Sharanarth are entrapped by the material nature. None of them actually know the nature of the absolute transcendence, although superficially accepting the Vedic principles and considering themselves transcendentalist. The philosophers of Banaras do not accept spiritual variegatedness because they have no information about the devotional service. They are called non devotees or those who are against the devotional service of the Lord Krishna.
So, because of lack of information, lack of correct information, lack of the spiritual information, because of not hearing from authority, not hearing from Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, then what we do? We use our mind to speculate. And because our mind is material, we cannot come to the correct conclusion. Yeah. So we can see how
The
important it is to
impersonalists speculate. Sorry.
please.
The impersonalists speculate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees and subject them to the test of direct perception. But the Lord, his devotees, and his devotional service are not subjected to the direct perception. In other words, spiritual variegatedness is unknown to Mayavadi philosophy. Therefore, all the Mayavadi philosophers and sannyasis criticized Lord Chaitanya when he was conducting his Sankirtan movement. They were surprised to see Lord Chaitanya chanting and dancing after he accepted his sannyas order from the Keshav Bharati, for Keshav Bharati belonged to the Mayavadi. Since Lord Chaitanya, therefore, also belonged to the Mayavadi sect of sannyasi, the Mayavadi was surprised to see him engaged in chanting and dancing instead of hearing or reading the Vedanta Sutras as is the custom. The Mayavadi philosophers are very fond of the Vedanta and they misinterpreted it in their own way. Misunderstanding their own position, they criticize Lord Chaitanya as an unauthorized sannyasi, arguing that because he was a sentimentalist, he was not actually a bona fide sannyasi.
So Lord Chaitanya, he took sannyas from Keshav Bharati, who is in a Mayavad line. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas in Mayavad line because at that time they were very popular. And so the other sannyasis, they told him, you're not even a real sannyasi because you're not reading Vedanta Sutra, you're just hearing and chanting and dancing. You know, what is this? You're not even a proper sannyasi. That's what they criticized them.
All these criticisms were carried to Lord Chaitanya when he was at Banaras, and he was not at all surprised at them. He even smiled when the news was carried to him. He did not associate with the Mayavadi sannyasis, but remained alone and executed his own mission. After staying for some days in Banaras, he started for Mathura.
Of course, later when he comes back, and then the Maharashtrian Brahman, I mean, the Tapan Mishra and Chandrasekhar are so sad that the sannyasis are criticizing Lord Chaitanya, and so he delivers them. We heard it in Caitanya Caritamita that Prakāśānanda Saraswati and his followers are here. Conversation. Okay. Then we read chapter 18.
Chapter 18, Conversations with Prakāśānanda. According to the principles of Mayavadi sannyasis, singing, dancing, and playing musical instruments are strictly prohibited, for they are considered to be sinful activities. The Mayavadi sannyasi is simply supposed to engage in the study of the Vedanta. Therefore, when a Mayavadi sannyasi in Banaras saw that Lord Chaitanya was indulging in singing, dancing, playing musical instruments, and always chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, They concluded that he was not educated and that out of sentiment, he was misleading his followers. Shankaracharya's injunction was that a sannyasi should always study the Vedanta and that he should be satisfied by simply having one cloth and nothing more. Because Lord Chaitanya neither studied the Vedanta formally nor ceased from singing and dancing, he was criticized by all the sannyasis at Banaras, as well as by their household of
followers. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Mama. So their main complaint was that he's not studying the Vedanta and he's always singing and dancing. So that was their complaint.
When Lord Chaitanya received news of his criticism from his students and disciples, he simply smiled and started for Mathura and Vrindavan. When he returned to Banaras and on his way from Mathura to Jagannath Puri, he stayed at the house of Chandrasekhar, who was considered a Shudra because he was a clerk. In spite of this, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made his residence at his home. Lord Chaitanya made no distinctions between Brahmanas and Shudras. He accepted anyone who was devotee. Customarily, a sannyasi is supposed to take shelter and eat in the home of a Brahmin. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as the independent Supreme Personality of Godhead, used his own discretion and decided to stay at Chandrasekhar's house.
So the devotees were unhappy that Lord Chaitanya was being criticized. Lord Chaitanya didn't care. He left Banaras. He went to Mathura and Vrindavan. Then coming back, he came back to, after he was returning Mathura, Puri, and then Banaras, he was coming back. He stayed at the house of Chandrasekhar Acharya. He didn't care which family Chandrasekhar Acharya was born in because Chandrasekhar Acharya is a pure devotee. That's what matters.
In those days, by misusing their Brahmanical heritage, the Brahmanas had created a law to the effect that anyone not born in a Brahmin family was to be considered a Shudra. Thus, even the Kshatriya and Vaishyas were also considered Shudras. Because the Vaishyas were said to be descendants of Brahmin fathers, this is because the Vedyas were considered to be the descendants of the Brahmin fathers and Shudra mothers. They were sometimes called Shudras. Thus, Chandrasekhar, although born in a Vedya family, was called a Shudra in Banaras. As long as Lord Chaitanya stayed in Banaras, he remained at Chandrasekhar's home and he took his food at the home of Tapan Mishra.
So this is when the caste system was there and the Brahmanas were kind of bullying everyone else and saying that, okay, we are only Brahmanas and everyone else is not important. But Lord Chaitanya is God himself. And he knows Chandrasekhar Acharya is a pure devotee of the Lord. So we continue.
When Sanatan Goswami met Lord Chaitanya at Banaras, he learned the process and principles of devotional service during 2 months of continual teaching. Lord Chaitanya's instruction to Sanatan Goswami has been described in the first part of this book. After receiving these teachings, Sanatan Goswami was authorized to propagate the principle of devotional service and Srimad Bhagavatam. It was during this time that both Tapan Mishra and Chandrasekhar were feeling very sorry about the strong criticism against Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they came together and prayed for the Lord to meet the Mayavadis.
So Lord Chaitanya instructed. So Lord Chaitanya, Sanatan Goswami was also in Banaras and he got the instructions from Lord Chaitanya for 2 months. Now, Prabhupada is saying it's at this time that Lord Chaitanya also converted the Mayavadi sannyasis. or rather gave them his mercy. It's more appropriate.
We have been mortified by hearing unfavorable criticism from the Mayavadi sannyasis against you. They informed Lord Chaitanya, indeed, it has become intolerable for us. They request the Lord to do something so that these criticisms would be stopped. While they were discussing this subject, a Brahmin came to Lord Chaitanya and invited him to his home. All the sannyasis with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had been invited, and now the Brahmin came to invite him. Knowing that the Lord did not mix with Mayavadi sannyasis, the Brahmin fell. The Brahmin fell down at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's feet and implored him, although I know that you do not accept invitation, I still implore you to come and take prasadam at my home with the other sannyasis. If you accept this invitation, I will consider a special favor.
So okay, let's read one more paragraph and then we can stop.
The Lord took this opportunity and accepted the Brahmin's invitation in order to meet the Mayavadi sannyasis. Actually, this was an arrangement made by Lord himself. Although the Brahmanas who invited him knew that the Lord did not accept any invitations, he was still very eager to invite them.
So tomorrow we'll continue reading of this pastime of how Lord Chaitanya gave his mercy to the sannyasis of Banaras. Let's stop here for today.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for listening and joining. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki